Hey y'all, welcome back to Right at the Wire. Well, we had some computer issues last week, so I apologize for not having any content, but obviously everything has been resolved. This week, we are going to take a look at the fairgrounds. There are 5 stakes races headlined by the Gun Runner for the 2-year-old boys and the Untapable for the 2-year-old fillies. So there are some Derby and Oaks ramifications. There is no all pick five all stakes pick five sequence. So what we're going to do is just go through all the stakes races. I'll give you my selections for each, and then you can mix and match where appropriate what sequences you feel are the best. So let's have at it. So the first one we're going to take a look at is the Gun Runner Stakes. It's the 7th race on the card. It's for ungraded for 150,000, running a mile and a 16th for 2-year-olds. So this is definitely an early indication of what we're looking at for some of these as far as their Derby capability. We'll start with, we'll go through them one at a time since there's only 5. We'll start with Built. Had a solid maiden score prior to the break, but when you consider how Render Judgment fared in the Kentucky Jockey Club, it kind of darkens the form a little bit, in my opinion. Going to have it pretty tough battling Admiral Dennis early. And that is exacerbated by Wayne Catalano's poor percentage with first-time routes. This one's kind of a wild card to me. I thought he did pretty well. He kept his energy well in the stretch, beating Render Judgment. But it really bothered me that Render Judgment didn't do better in the Kentucky Jockey Club. So I kind of want to downgrade that effort a bit. And dealing with Admiral Dennis, I think, really is going to compromise his chances. So, Built is one that, really the question is going to be how quick they're going to go on the front end. You see, there's no confirmed front runner, but I think, we look at number 5, Admiral Dennis. I mean, he rated pretty quick. Behind pretty quick fractions, and he showed some really nice grit holding off Mischievous Time in the stretch for the maiden win. Doing that at a mile, to me, as opposed to 7 furlongs for Built, is kind of gives him the edge. And of course, Brad Cox, Luis Saez, really hard to knock. In particular, this is the first 2-turn effort for Admiral Dennis. And we know Brad Cox does extremely well when he stretches out his 2-year-old. So the fact that he did so well going down the stretch, I thought really, to me, makes the difference here. And so I think Admiral Dennis is probably the one I like the best, and he would be my primary selection in here. Looking at Magnitude is kind of an interesting horse in here, and a little bit of a wild card. Excuse me. He showed really good resolve off the bench in that optional claimer to get a career high Brisnet figure, and that's always a good sign, particularly with 2-year-olds coming off the bench. You have to upgrade as well because using Jose Ortiz here and moving away from his son Eric, I think for Steve Asmussen shows some really good intent. And this combo has just been lethal at the fairgrounds. They're hitting it 41%. So Magnitude, I've liked what I've seen. He has shown some good been against some good competition. In the Iroquois, wasn't really able to sustain a run, but I think given the time, he's probably improving, and I think he is ready to move forward. He's one that I like in this spot. I think he's a use as well. I just think Admiral Dennis is probably going to have a little bit of an edge, probably in a little bit better position, and I have a feeling that he's going to have some better closing kick. But Magnitude is certainly one to consider. Chris's Revenge, I just think, is overmatched here, and he's a toss for me. 6-1 especially isn't very appealing. I know it'll be a lot. His odds will be a lot better than that, but I don't see him being competitive here. Render Judgment really disappointed me in the Kentucky Jockey Club. I really liked him going into that spot, and it's doubly disappointing by the fact that he was further back than he had been in his maiden win, yet he can only muster a really mild rally, and they were slower fractions. He's going to get quicker here. That is to his advantage, but the thing I'd liked about him in the race prior to the Kentucky Jockey Club was that he was up closer to the pace, and it looked to me like a horse who was improving. And then Brian Hernandez takes him back further, and sometimes to me that it speaks more to the quality of the horse. So I thought that was a really disappointing effort. But the fact that Built and Admiral Dennis may get a little keen on the front end, that may set things up pretty well, and you're going to have a long stretch at the fairgrounds, and we know Brian Hernandez is good with late runners. So I think Render Judgment maybe renders or is worthy of maybe another look here. But I just was so disappointed by that race, and he looks more of a grinder to me. Maybe he's going to have a setup worthy of him, but I just, that last effort, I really wanted to see a better move forward than we got. So in the Gun Runner, I think Admiral Dennis is the one to go with, but you could give a look to Magnitude and Render Judgment as well. Render Judgment is particularly going to be what kind of pace scenario you feel it's going to be. I think it's going to be probably fairly moderate. I don't see either one of them, especially at the fairgrounds, going to be wanting to gun it early on, and I think that kind of spells doom for Render Judgment, but probably more of an underneath candidate to me. So again, Admiral Dennis, the pick to win this one. Next one we're going to have a look at is the 8th race. It's the Scherer Memorial. It's 100,000 ungraded, run at 5.5 furlongs on the turf for 3-year-olds and up. And I'll tell you, this is a really kind of a tricky race. There's it to me it screams of value, yet the value I can't really find, to be honest. Just looking at them, I mean, you can see how many horses like to come from off the pace here. So you would think this would set up really well for Bear River, but I just can't go there. The form just isn't there for me, and so I settled on one timer. Larry Ravelli's just white hot at the meet, and I think it's a really good sign that E.T. Baird came down from Chicago for this race. And this one had to look, in the last race in the Holiday Cheer, it looked like a horse that needed a race to me. It was a kind of a dull third, broke really sharply, and then just sort of flattened out. It was no match for the top two, but we know this horse has really good back class, and the 7-day layoff doesn't bother me, or the wheelback rather, at all with Larry Ravelli. He's just too good. If he's putting this horse in the race, he feels it. I think this one has a big-time class edge over a lot of these. And, the fact that most of these like to come from off the pace, one-timer should be sitting right off of Bear River, and when it's time to push the button, should have a tactical edge on the rest of them. So I'm going to go with one-timer here, mainly for the class. Looking at the rest of them, I mean, somebody like Mischievous Rogue, for instance, he ran a really nice race last time, but the big problem with this horse is he just doesn't get out of the gate well, and it cost him in the last one. Macedo just had a little bit better edge early on, was able to get into better position, and consequently Mischievous Rogue was wanting in the stretch, and closed with a flourish. It was really too bad. But it's hard to trust a horse who doesn't get out of the gate as well, particularly when you've got so many other horses coming from off the bench here. So to me, this one, given the fact that the pace scenario should be pretty moderate, I think it's going to be very difficult for Mischievous Rogue to mount a winning attack. I think underneath is probably the best. And also consider you don't get Luis Saez for this run. Panther Island is another one who looked like he needed one off the bench. He ran pretty well at Gulfstream before flattening out in the stretch in his last race, and I think he's going to move forward. But the big question to me is how he's going to handle the fairgrounds turf over the pavement at Gulfstream Park. It's a big, markedly different track, and the fairgrounds turf course isn't usually the greatest. We always seem to have problems with them. The rails are way the hell out most of the time, although it is early in the meet. I think, Brad Cox, Luis Saez, I mean, that's encouraging. And, if anybody's going to get this one over the top, certainly Luis Saez can do it. I think Panther Island, if he takes to the fairgrounds turf course, has every bit as good a chance as any of them in here. 6-1, that's a pretty decent price. Don't know if we'll get it at post time, but I think Panther Island is certainly one that you have to consider. Minnesota Ready would be logical, but every time this horse has been at fairgrounds, I've always liked him, and he always ends up third. He just doesn't seem to cater or cotton to the fairgrounds turf course for some reason. He just can't seem to get over the top. The only one he does have it is in the Colonel Power when they moved it off the turf. It also could be this might be a little short for him. I don't know, but he's kind of hard to trust, particularly with, again, all the other later runners. That's usually not a great scenario for a closer, particularly in turf sprints. I'm also not sure he's going to have really pace to run to. Probably not. So there's a lot of reasons to go against him here, and I just not even consider. I'd just rather leave him off rather than try to even put him in there. What likely is going to be a short price on the track he hasn't had great success with. Son of a Birch to me is very interesting, mainly because you've got hair on a lot of these. Like Stitched we haven't mentioned, but his form has been steadily declining and had been running around 2 turns. Now they moved him back to sprints in the last one, and it didn't seem to make a dent. And he's just had steadily declining speed figures, and even at 12-1, I can't go there. But Son of a Birch, he had a kind of a tough trip from the inside in the Turf Sprint Championship at Aqueduct, but he did finish with some interest, and I almost think that Johnny V kind of geared him down a little bit when it was clear he wasn't going to win the race. Regardless, he's been working steadily since that race, which is always a good sign. He's got 4 works following, and as a 4-year-old, he's got every right to improve, and maybe there's a little more tread on the tires at this late stage of the year. There are question marks with quite a few in here, so to me at 8-1 and third off the layoff, I think he's a really interesting prospect, and he does offer some nice value. And again, this is a kind of a weird race in my opinion, but I think one-timer on class alone, and I think he's poised second off the layoff, coming onto a surface he prefers rather than synthetic. Is a very logical pick here, so one-timer for the win. But Panther Island and Son of a Birch, I think, are worthy of consideration. And this is a race I'd probably want to hedge a little bit because, again, it's rife with vulnerability. The third stakes race we're going to talk about is the Tenacious Stakes. It's the 9th race. It's ungraded at 100,000. Running a mile and a 16th for 3-year-olds and up. And taking a look at this field, there's some really notable names here. A couple from the Derby trails of the past, and a couple of interesting 3-year-olds. It's, to me, it's a little more wide open than perhaps it looks, but I think ultimately we end up at the same place no matter what we do here, and I'll tell you why. Just talk about a couple here. Track Phantom, first of all, on the rail, 3 for 3 at the fairgrounds, but let's remember that really wasn't against a whole lot. None of those races for 3-year-olds only on the Derby Trail came back for much, and once he faced the big boys like Sierra Leone, he was pretty much toast. We did find out over the course of those races that once he was pressed and actually had to do a little work on the front end, that he didn't hold up. And the last race was kind of indicative of that, coming off a long layoff, running at 7 furlongs, and he didn't have the lead, but he was right on it and took the lead in the stretch after running at some pretty quick fractions, and he got run down. Couldn't hold off Horace Mann, and I think that's really telling about Track Phantom. It's just he sort of has to have everything his own way. Now, I think Saudi Crown is coming to this race in not the greatest of form, and so it's conceivable Track Phantom will have the lead to himself. But even so, early on, Saudi Crown's probably going to give him a run for his money, and so, again, we'll talk about Saudi Crown and what I think he is right now, but it's enough for Track Phantom. If Saudi Crown's a little vulnerable, then he may be able to hang on. But I don't see him winning this race based upon his prior form and what he needs in order to run his best effort. You are certainly getting Steve Asmussen second off the layoff with Jose Ortiz, and he did run a Brisnet figure near his best. But again, it's conditional, and that's really what bothers me the most about Track Phantom. But I think you can certainly use him in the exotics, but I don't see him as a win candidate here. Now, we'll talk about number 2, Kinetic, and I think he's the very logical pick to win this race. I really like the finish in the optional claimer Churchill last time, especially coming off the bench. He got a career-high Brisnet number after, prior to that layoff, he had a very nice, solid progression, which you always want to see in 2 and 3-year-olds. He's going to be in very good position. He should be able to rate just off whoever takes the lead, whether it be Saudi Crown or Track Phantom. And I think he's being a lot fresher than most of these because he didn't run earlier in the year. I just think he looks like the logical one to beat, and I really like Connecticut in this spot, and he's the pick to win it. Number 3, Warrior Johnny. I just don't like the pattern after top efforts. He just ran a 100 Brisnet figure, and it's been his MO that after he runs a really big race, he has a steady decline for a few races afterwards. And, I love Phil Bauer, Wrigley Racing, great outfit. But I'm going to pass on Warrior Johnny as I think he's probably on the down slope right now. We'll wait for him later. Now, Saudi Crown number 7, obviously, he's the 9-5 favorite. He has a tremendous class edge over quite a few of these, but he looks like he's toast to me, to be honest. At this point in the year, he's had a long year with a lot of really tough races. And, I don't think Track Phantom would bother him on his best day. I think Saudi Crown would wire this field with a fair amount of ease. But I think you're getting him in at the end of the year. This looks like an owner-influenced decision to me to run him. And, I think that was the Breeders' Cup Mile pretty much said it all. And you certainly don't want, after a clunker like that, to bet a horse who's the post-time or morning line favorite, probably be the post-time favorite, in this type of race. Even though it is ungraded, it's certainly class relief. But I just don't want to take him after what I've seen after the last couple of races. So I'm just not even going to bother with him. I'm just going to let him go. Now, the next couple, Velociter and Bo Cruz, are pretty much the same story to me. Velociter in particular was ultra consistent. He had a really good second in the Charlestown Classic last time. But to me, he's kind of reached the zenith of his ability. I don't see he going much farther past where he is right now. And he's a serviceable horse. He's very capable. And I think, without a doubt, he can get into the money in this race. I just don't know that he has the top end or the potential to run a big enough effort to win this race, given the contenders he's got in this one. But I think he's absolutely one you can use underneath, but I don't like his chances to win this race. Kind of the same thing with Bo Cruz, but I don't think he's as good as Velociter. He's going to rebound from the no-show with Thanksgiving. Those things happen in horse racing. We know this. But him running his best race, I don't think just doesn't stack up with the other horses in this race. But I think he will run his race, and it'll be good enough to get underneath. And that's the extent of my interest here. Finally, I'm not even going to bother with Confidence Game. He just hasn't had any good form since the Rebel Stakes, and I just don't see it, so I'm not even going to bother with him. Happy American is kind of the same as Confidence Game. He hasn't had good form all year. He's 0 for 10. He is back around 2 turns, and that will help him a bit. But he really hasn't run well since that spell at the fairgrounds a couple of years ago. He just looks overmatched here. I don't think he's going to really have much that works in his favor in this race. So I'll be passing on Happy American. So to make a long story short, Kinetic is the horse to beat. I think he's the freshest coming in here. I think he's got the most upside, and I think he's catching solid ground at just the right time. And I think Connecticut is a very logical single in this race. The Di Liberto Memorial Stakes is the 10th race on the Saturday card. It's ungraded at 100,000, run at a mile and a 16th on the turf for 3-year-olds and up. And this, to me, is a pretty wide open race, and certainly the one you have to spread the most in, I think. We'll talk about each of them because there are only 7. Swift Shore is likely going to be the speed, I would say. He's had 2 quality wins since moving to the turf, and you do get Luis Saez, who is the best finisher in the business right now. And Mike Maker, we know, is great at stretching horses out on the turf. He's had a month to work with this one, first off the claim. And, Mike Maker is usually really good at finding hidden value. This one is certainly has proven that he can wire the field. And, he's going to have some company up front, but looks to be in good form and may have a little bit of a speed edge figure-wise. So if by chance he's able to tamp the pace down, he may have a chance to wire it. I think he's certainly worth consideration. Number 1, I'd Rather Be Blessed, is another early runner for Chris Hartman, and this one has faltered when moving up in class. And the case in point was the optional claimer at Churchill Downs in his last, where similar to this race, he had to battle for the lead before fading late, and I kind of expect the same scenario here. I just don't see the same upside as I do with Swift Shore. So to me, I'd Rather Be Blessed is one I'm very willing to let go, especially at 9-2. Gigante will always have a soft plate, warm place in my heart because I did have him in the Secretariat at 22-1. He had a pretty dull third, I thought, in the River City against Better Than Here. He did rate kindly without any excuses before flattening out. I think he was just a little bit over his head. Really can't overlook Steve Asmussen and Jose Ortiz right now. They're just clicking on all cylinders. And he is getting some class relief third off the layoff, so he's a good fit here for sure. The price is prohibitive, though. This is a horse that I'm just not overly comfortable taking at that short a price, but I think he's certainly one that you have to use. Number 5, Stitched, is cross-entered in the Shearer, so watch for the scratches. And to me, this would be a more logical spot. I think that last allowance sprint at Churchill may have been an attempt just to sharpen up his form because it really hasn't been very good. He's been in a steady decline in figures over the last few, but he does have the back class and a positive record at Fairgrounds. So at 12-1, I think you're getting a really good price, and just had a bullet work out of 135. So I think that shows some good intent here and that he's definitely ready to go. So if you're looking for a really nice value play, I think Stitched might be it. Certainly one that you want to use. I settled on Evan Harlan. He was heading in the right direction last year at Fairgrounds, and he has progressed to a degree without really advancing in class, and that's always a concern that they haven't really tried to move him up into the stakes company. And, when you have a barn like Brendan Walsh's, that is a little bit of a concern. However, I did like the effort in the optional claimer over this course off the bench, though he couldn't hold off Verstappen. Verstappen is a graded stakes winner. So he may have been a little bit over his head. So this is a bit of class relief. And you just can't overlook anything from Brendan Walsh when his barn is clicking. And he's going really well right now. And as we know with Brendan Walsh, once his barn gets hot, they stay hot for a while. So that to me, I think second off the layoff, I'm expecting a good effort. You do lose Jose Ortiz, though, but you have to believe that when Asmussen calls, Jose's going to go there, and he does have the favorite. But nonetheless, I don't know that Gigante has that much of an edge over the rest of the horses in this field to merit a 9-5 morning line. And so I will look for value, and I think at 8-1, you're getting a horse who has some upside and is poised for a nice effort. Should be sitting off the horses who are all going to be jockeying for the lead, and that may give him a tactical edge if things get a little quick, and they could very well, particularly with Swift Sure and I'd Rather Be Blessed kind of battling it out. So Evan Harlan, I'm just going to go for the value here, but I do, again, you think you have to spread in this race. Just to talk about the closers, another mystery. He's had a great year. He's won 4 in a row at Hawthorne, and he's been in the money in all 5 races this year. But yeah, I do have to note that 3 of them were on yielding turf, and that may be preferable to him. It seems to be. The one lone effort on firm turf, he did win, but his number was significantly lower than what would be required here. And that's really what gives me concern more than anything else. He'd certainly need a faster effort than he's logged this year to win. And at 8 years old, that's a pretty tall order. And I just don't like him at 4-1, so I'm going to let him go. Tonka Warrior is another who would need a career best stepping up in class here. And I don't like the tab. He hasn't had a work in 2 weeks. And I think he would, he would really need a big effort. I love McLean Robinson. He's one of my favorite trainers. But I just can't see it here. So for the value, we'll go with Evan Harlan in the Di Liberto. The last race we're going to look at is the Untapable Stakes. It's the 11th race on the card, ungraded at 100,000, running a mile and 70 yards for 2-year-old fillies. So this definitely will have some Oaks implications for sure. I think this is a really good field. And to be honest, I think you really got to split hairs to find a defined winner here. We'll go through them one at a time. I know you guys want to, and I do too. I like to look at all the 2-year-olds, especially at this time of year. So I'll give you my thoughts on each. We'll start with Stable Currency, who's likely to be the speed. Validated the big maiden score off the turf with a game second, 2 back, and an optional claimer at Keeneland, but really hasn't progressed in 3 straight starts. And in fact, the class rating dipped when the race rating rose to his stiffest challenge last out. That is never a good sign. You always want to see 2-year-olds where the class rating continues to rise, especially when the caliber of race is better. So those are all, to me, signs that Stable Currency probably isn't progressing. And not at this point anyway, as much as some of the others. So I think it's likely that she won't be a factor here, so I'm going to let her go. Amarth had a determined effort, number 6, in the optional claimer at Churchill Downs, closing into soft fractions, which is always a pretty good sign when they can muster a late rally when there isn't much pace to run to. It is a little troubling, however, that Blessed the Broken didn't fire back in the Demoiselle as I thought she would. I was really high on that horse. Some of you may know that, who saw my post on it. So perhaps the race wasn't quite as good as it appeared. I do like the fact that she stepped up after a soft maiden score. And a lot of times when these 2-year-olds, they break their maiden against really mediocre fields, they don't follow it up with a good effort. So I thought that was a positive for Amarth. And you get Saez, which is always a positive. But, I mean, to me, the speed figure is really the issue more than anything else. I think that's the determining characteristic here. And she just needs to get faster, in my opinion. And at 7-2, it's a little short, so I'm going to look elsewhere. Paris Lily for Godolphin, number 7. I was pretty impressed with her maiden win. Showed a lot of grit in the stretch, dueling with Mimi's Grace. And, Mimi's Grace looked like a statue at the top of the stretch. Jockey wasn't moving a muscle. And Paris Lily just wouldn't go away. And the jockey from Mimi's Grace really had to get into her. And Paris Lily still was able to get her head out in front and showed a lot of fight. Problem is, Mimi's Grace really came back with a pretty dull 5th at Oaklawn in the last race. And for Paris Lily, I really don't like the gap between works. And this one, kind of needs another move to factor here. Can't overlook Brendan Walsh for Godolphin. You do get Jose Ortiz. Those are all pluses. But Um, the back of my mind, I sit there and I think about First Resort and even Immersive. I mean, some of these Godolphins who didn't show a whole lot early and then all of a sudden just made a monster leap forward. So if you keep that in the back of your mind, Paris Lily, I wouldn't talk you out of using her. I'm just going by what I see speed figure wise, and I don't know that I see enough to see that Paris Lily is going to make that big move forward. And that's really the reason that I'm not going to use her, but I wouldn't blame me if you do at all. Number 2, Prima Bella, was solid if unspectacular in the maiden win at Fairgrounds, although the class of field I thought was pretty dubious, so I'm going to take a wait and see approach with her. Excuse me. Now, number 3, her laugh to me is pretty interesting, and I'm going to pick her on top to win. Bobbled a bit at the start, and then overcame the 11 hole to win the maiden last time, and she showed a lot of determination holding off Violent Irene late. Whit Beckman is red hot right now with the meet, and the pedigrees to me, while it's not overly spectacular for a mile and a quarter, for a mile and 70 yards, I think it's just fine. Point of entry underneath in particular. So, to me, I think you're getting a really nice price at 6-1, particularly where I think the top horses are pretty evenly matched. And if this one can put it all together first time around 2 turns, I think it's going to be awful dangerous. So I'm willing to take a chance based upon what I saw in that maiden win. So her laugh to me, the pick at 6-1. Golden Gamble romped in the maiden score with an increased class rating, and the late fractions increased as well at the same distance as today, so you have to like that. We tipped her out, if you recall, that posting. Girl Math was the big favorite in that race, but I don't think, still hasn't broken her maiden. But Golden Gamble, what impressed me more than anything was, as often with Kenny McPeaks, they linger at the back in their debut and then get progressively better. But when they do, when the really good ones do, it's when they start getting closer to the pace. And that was the case with Golden Gamble, and I thought that showed a really big improvement. And now coming in third off the layoff, I think it's very logical that Golden Gamble's going to take another move forward. The last work wasn't very much to write home about, but that likely was just a maintenance move, and I'm not going to worry about that too much. So to me, Golden Gamble is certainly a logical candidate. It just, to me, 5-2 in this field, again, where they're pretty closely, evenly matched, I'm just going to try to get a little better price, and that's really the only reason. Golden Gamble can absolutely win this race without a doubt. Number 8, Drexel Hill, is probably the most interesting horse to me in this race. She just romped at Woodbine last time on synthetic, and I think that's going to have her rock fit for this one. Whit Beckman has taken over the training, and he's had enough time to put his system of training in. I like to see that at least 30 days, and you've got it here. The one concern I might have with Drexel Hill is she did have pace to run to in that last race, whereas in her prior maiden efforts, the pace had been kind of moderate to slow, where she had been second in a couple of them. Well, finally having some pace really put it all together. Now, the pedigree says dirt. I'm not worried about that, and as some of you, a lot of you know who follow me on the channel know, I love the synthetic to dirt angle. It's just horses. It's like it's like running, like going from running on sand to running on pavement, and I think that Drexel Hill, if she can run back to that or put it all together on dirt, she could be awfully dangerous in here. Whit Beckman, he's got 2 in this race, so we'll see what happens. But at 8-1, I think it's a horse as a wild card you have to consider. California Sunset's awful logical. Had a really hard-fought maiden win at Churchill, and Golden Gamble came back and won her next start out pretty impressively. Showed some good courage in the stretch. And Brad Cox is always tough with a fresh horse off of these layoffs. So I think it's fully logical to expect a move forward, and certainly is one in the mix. I just, uh, that last race, I mean, she did get the win, but there were some things about it I wasn't overly impressed with, and just kind of a lingering thought, and that it's not clear cut, and I think that's why she's not the favorite here, and why Golden Gamble is. Golden Gamble had more trouble in that race, and was very logical to move forward. So, to me, it's really splitting hairs to come up with one in this race. So I'm just going to go with the horse I think who can make the biggest leap forward here with Her Laugh. But again, I think it's a spread race, and any of the four that we have over to the right here certainly have a chance to win this race. So as I mentioned, we don't have a pick five, all stakes pick five. Why, I don't know, but these are my selections for each of the stakes races. And if I had to pick a sequence that I might want to go with, I would want to have leg 3 with Kinetic as my single. I think it's the best bet of the day. So whether you want to use the Scherer and the Di Liberto, or you want to use the Di Liberto and the Untapable for races 9, 10, 11 for a pick 3 maybe, that might be where I'd go. You also have in the Gun Runner, I think, a pretty good, pretty solid candidate. So a 7, 8, 9 pick 3, or even a pick 4, 7, 8, 9, 10. But I think you definitely have to have Kinetic in there. I think you're going to get a price, and I really think is the logical single from this grouping. The last two races I think are spreads based upon the fields, so you can take that for what you will. It should be a real fun day of racing at the fairgrounds. I love it when they have these big stakes days, and it's always fun to have John G. Dooley on the races too. He's awful talkative, but I love him. So I hope our analysis helps you with your own wagering strategy, and I wish you the best of luck as always. And of course, this time of year, I probably won't talk to you again till after Christmas, so I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a safe and happy holiday season. And if you do like content like this, of course, please like and subscribe. That's it from here. I'll talk to you soon, and until then, be well.